give everyone a heads up for signing in. Any other links will be in the chat. I think we can hand it over to, Eli. I want to get started. He'll be the first speaker. Let's get this going.
Okay, comrades, hope you can hear me well. Let me know if you are not hearing me. Well, as Megan said, I am Eli, or Eli in Portuguese, as you wish. I am a subway worker in São Paulo, Brazil, and a member of LSR, the Brazilian section of the ISA. And I was invited to talk a little about the struggles that are happening in the country in these days. But before, not taking too long, I have to send all the solidarity we can send from here, Brazil, to Kshama, Sawant defense against the right-wing recall that she is facing now. To us, Kshama is an international example of how to combine intervention in the parliament against the billionaires with the organizing and mobilizing on the streets. And that's the main reason why the bourgeoisie is trying to take she off the city council. Well, as you know, we are facing here in Brazil a far-right government that is primarily responsible by the crisis the country is facing now. Bolsonaro said in the beginning of the pandemic crisis that he was against the lockdowns to save the economy. And the result now is that we have 586,000 deaths in the country. And due to the corruption of the government and to his anti-science conceptions, we have a delay in the vaccination, have only 30% of the population fully vaccinated today in the country. And we are very concerned about the new variants of the virus and the deepening of the pandemic crisis that might face in the next months. And he did not save the economy. In the last quarter, Brazil faced negative growth of his GDP. We have 14 million people officially unemployed, and even the workers that kept their jobs have faced loss in their incomes and a great rate of inflation during this last year. And now the increase in the deforestation makes the country faces the worst drought in 9 years. Now it's putting risk of blackouts because there is a crisis of energetic supply in the country because of the drought. That's the reason that today 75% of Brazilian population rejects the Bolsonaro government. But he still has a strong social basis constructed around his authoritarian politics, his misogynist positions, racist positions, and neoliberal economic program with the bourgeoisie. That's why in the last September 7, our Independence Day, he carried out big demonstrations in the streets in support of his government. But what was shown with these demonstrations is that Bolsonaro has not the strength he thought he had. And days after, he had to make humiliating setbacks after radicalizing the September 7. Now, what we can see is that Bolsonaro has no more electoral viability to the elections on the next year. And that's why he tries to intensify his threats of a coup d'etat that would be the only way to save him from the risk he has to be imprisoned after his government, because he has a corrupt, genocidal, and authoritarian government. This is one we face a situation that is urgent to overthrow Bolsonaro in Brazil, because if this does not happen, we might see scenes as we saw in the January 6th in Washington. But here it might be dramatic because the support that Bolsonaro has among the military police in Brazil. That's our major difference with the center-left parties, as the Workers' Party from Lula, that dedicate all their action and expectations in the next year presidential elections. And therefore, they demobilize the street demonstrations, and they try to contain them under their control. And even in the election, the Workers' Party refuses to present an independent alternative of the workers and the oppressed, and try to build alliances with the right-wing opposition to Bolsonaro. This right-wing opposition to Bolsonaro has the same economic program, neoliberal, of trying to destroy the public services, the public companies, the labor rights in the country. And that's why they cannot mobilize the population against Bolsonaro. The great example was given today when they carried out demonstrations. They were much smaller than the demonstrations that were called by the left in the last months. And so here we, or LSR, are among the others that tried to build an independent and alternative and socialist alternative to the workers and the oppressed. That is the only way to defeat Bolsonaro. So we have to intensify the street demonstrations and to organize a general strike to destroy Bolsonaro before the next year. I would like to say, just comrades, last few words about a historical mobilization that's taking place in Brazil today of the indigenous people, and that put on the table the destiny of the climate of the planet. Today, the Supreme Court and the Parliament are trying to adopt a bizarre thesis of the temporal mark. It's a thesis that establishes that the indigenous people can claim only the lands they were in 1988 when our constitution was enacted. It's completely bizarre because the indigenous lands are the most preserved areas in the country. So it puts in risk the Amazon rainforest and other ecosystems. It's an international problem that we count with your solidarity. This is very important. For us, it's very hopeful to see the organization work carried out by the socialists in America, which we see as the major capitalist and imperialist country in the world. We're very hopeful to see your work there, comrades. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And it sounds like, so at the beginning of this rally, it sounds like we might have been having some technical difficulties. So just to introduce what we're doing here tonight, this is a rally to defeat the right-wing recall that is happening against Seattle City Councilmember Kshama Sawant. We just had Eli from Brazil speak about how they have their own right-wing. They have Bolsonaro, who is very much like the Trump of Brazil. And him talking about how a January 6th in the US can just as easily happen in Brazil, but with military police on Bolsonaro's side, is another reason why Socialist Alternative is part of an international. Things do not just happen in a vacuum politically. We are talking about not just Seattle tonight, but how the right wing in the US, anywhere else, has to be defeated, because there'll be a domino effect. So we've talked about, right-wing attacks on our movements and on the working class in the US with abortion rights, voting rights, trans rights, immigrant rights, against Kshama's seat. Eli talked about the indigenous preservation of lands. We have that same connection in the US, here in Minneapolis and Minnesota. We're fighting to stop a pipeline, Line 3. So I think it's important that Eli is here and that we do keep this in an international perspective. So we just heard from Eli. What is at stake nationally is, again, not just a city council seat, but it's setting a dangerous precedent for any Marxist, any socialist that wants to run and win office and then win victories for the working class. If billionaires, donors, Republicans, right-wingers can just come in and recall anyone that is actually a fighter for the working class, that's a huge, huge danger for the left. Our next speaker, I think, is also going to talk about, with Bolsonaro, we have Trump. He's been defeated, but he still has a loyal base and has ushered in this kind of new right-wing period. And I think that'll continue to grow unless, like Eli was saying, the left can provide a clearer, stronger alternative, independent of, at least in the US, the GOP and the Democrats. So I will hand it over to a leader in Socialist Alternatives Black Caucus, Tamar.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. So last year, we experienced historic multiracial uprisings against racial suppression, and in the aftermath, we've heard big promises, but so far we have seen no change in Black people's material conditions, and now with COVID, even a retreat in that factor. Elites in the Democratic Party like Nancy Pelosi and James Clyburn co-opted the BLM movement in service of getting Joe shoot him in the leg Biden elected, but with full Democratic control of the government. They and their corporate allies have done little to advance any of the federal police reforms Biden campaigned on, like building a National Police Oversight Commission or signing the George Floyd Policing Act, into law. Across the country, the right is taking full advantage in the space created by Democrats, failing to progress on even their broader aims like controlling COVID, stopping mass evictions, protecting voting rights, a $15 minimum wage, or even healthcare reform. As the right wing are finding their footing due to Democrat inaction, it's more clear than ever before that the political establishment can't be looked to for leadership, and that as working people, we will have to fight to protect our own. On the local level, this perspective is confirmed and then some. In Philly, despite voters overwhelmingly approving the creation of a community police oversight commission, the Democrats in city council have worked to bureaucratically control, defang, and mislead the initiative. Eric Adams in New York City won the Democratic primary for mayor on an explicitly pro-police, pro-austerity platform, and even called to resurrect the blatantly racist stop and frisk tactic as a way to address the gun violence crisis devastating Black communities. In Seattle, the Democrat-led political establishment has abandoned its earlier promise to cut police funding by 50%. And lastly, there's Minneapolis, the epicenter of last year's uprising, where Democrats have spent millions of dollars more hiring more police officers. Let me be clear. The nonviolent protests in Democrat-controlled cities all across the country were responded to with massive mobilizations of law enforcement meant to suppress them, and this has only emboldened the far right in their recent attacks on voting rights and the right to protest. No more evident than on the recall election of the only elected official in the country who materially stood with the movement for Black Lives Matter last year, Kshama Sawant. The newly expanded squad and progressive senators like Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey could be putting up a fight for lasting gains, but they have yet to take a real stand in Congress. Instead of banding together to form a progressive bloc capable of withstanding the corporate establishment's assault, instead of using their office to organize working people, labor unions, community groups, and movement leaders in direct actions to fight and win things like expanded voting rights, community control over police, or a higher minimum wage, they have largely been accomplices in maintaining the status quo, coordinating their votes even to allow narrow passage of police militarization bills, dropping demands for immediate Medicare for all, and even defending Biden's continued use of ICE concentration camps. Cori Bush's sleep in protest at the steps of Capitol Hill, which won an extension to the eviction moratorium, was a decent start, but it pales in comparison to what we need to see from the progressive leaders in Congress, directly confronting the corporate establishment and the growing power of the far right and Republicans. The Senate's recent unanimous vote to penalize municipalities who actually work to defund their police departments reveals the role of the Democratic Party in co-opting, diluting, and ultimately betraying the movement for Black lives. The pervasive feeling of demoralization over the lack of material wins from last year's movement shows why we can't wed our social movements to the corporate existing political parties, and why we need to build a new political vehicle for Black liberation. We need our own party of the multiracial working class, one that can intervene in social movements in a genuine way, and which doesn't rely on token woke capitalist overtures for appeal. This year, Socialist Alternative created its Black Caucus to help arm a new generation of Black freedom fighters with the Marxist analysis necessary to better comprehend racist oppression under capitalism in the current epoch, and the tools to train them on how to organize their community to fight back. This initiative is backed up by the full support of a multiracial, revolutionary socialist fighting organization that's won $15 minimum wage in Seattle, New York City, and Minneapolis, and that's won historic taxes on the largest corporation in the world and was successful in actually curtailing police power against protesters last year. Our Black Caucus has hosted both public and internal Black members only meetings to discuss and strategize about the way forward. If you're Black and you're interested in hearing more, please follow the caucus, our caucus Instagram at @BlackCaucus_Socialist Alt. Due to our power as workers, the multiracial working class is the only force in society capable of carrying out the monumental task to replace capitalism and begin the transition to a society free of racist oppression and one that's capable of tackling the climate crisis together. Black liberation requires a socialist revolution, and a socialist revolution requires the Black working class. When we fight, we win. If you're ready to fight, then you should join Socialist Alternative. Check us out at socialistalternative.org. Solidarity.
Thanks, Tamar. I was gonna say, I want to be in Tamar's organization, but I am. So I'm ready. I'm excited. Socialist Alternative. I thought that was also what Tamar was saying about Minneapolis. Absolutely nothing has changed, which is appalling. Though there have been people that believe the police have been defunded in Minneapolis when they certainly have not. If anything, yes, they've added to their budget. So I think our next speaker is going to highlight even more of some of the historic struggles that we've been a part of and what it's actually going to take to win. Sorry, there's a big truck that went by. Anyway, okay. This member is from New York City. They are housing justice activists. Socialist Alternative is fighting for rent control in Seattle, Minneapolis, and New York. And so this member, Ellen, is going to speak on some of that. So I'll hand it over to Ellen.
All right, thanks, Megan. And yeah, I want to join this organization too. Sign me up. All right, yeah, I want to draw out some more of the sort of points that Tamar was making, and really talk a little bit more about the role of the courts and in all of this. So, every election cycle, we're told that our only option is to settle for a lesser evil Democrat who, let's face it, is really just evil. There are plenty of reasons that we're told this is our only option, but the inevitable fallback is always that we need a Democrat in office, right, to pick the next Supreme Court justice. And in the run-up to the 2020 election, after Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away and the Trump administration rushed to install the right-wing Amy Coney Barrett, Democrats did, some hand-wringing over it, but ultimately they put up no real opposition, promising instead that they would move to pack the courts if we could just get Biden into office. The Biden administration itself, of course, never actually endorsed this method. And despite opening this sluggish bureaucratic commission to explore court reforms, Democrats have continually leaned on the Supreme Court as an excuse to stop them from making any real moves that reflect the dire urgency of the conditions that working class Americans are facing, despite their majorities, but in both the House and the Senate. And as the Supreme Court has blocked the eviction moratorium extension and 7.5 million unemployed workers in the US have just lost their extended unemployment benefits, Democrats have opted for symbolic gestures around these issues and vague promises of future reforms, which ring extremely hollow given all the previous promises that they've reneged on. And in practice, they're doing nothing right now concrete about these crises, and in practice, leaving millions vulnerable to evictions and life-altering debt. They've offered no real path forward for renters or the unemployed, despite only about $5 billion of the $46.5 billion in rent aid having been distributed, and US household debt hitting a new high of $15 trillion cumulative dollars. And certainly if there were ever a time to rush to pack the courts, it would be right now, as the conservative Supreme Court has upheld Texas's existential attack on the right to abortion access, beginning the undoing of Roe v. Wade and leading to a domino effect where other states like Florida are already drafting similar abortion bans. But instead of packing the courts or mobilizing the types of mass movements that actually pushed Roe v. Wade through in the first place, the actions of the Democratic establishment are limited once again to political arithmetic within the confines of the very courts which allowed the abortion ban to go through. So as the Justice Department sues Texas over the bill, we must see this for exactly what it is. This is empty lip service. This is ultimately nothing but an attempt to curb mass struggle before it begins, because the Democratic Party establishment prefers to prioritize the stability of their capitalist system over any real fight for protections against attacks on working people's basic rights. But would a so-called progressive court even be able to address the most pressing life or death matters that working and oppressed people face today? Because when the working class politicians like independent socialist city council member Kshama Sawant take a fighting stand against capitalist oppression, Washington State's progressive Supreme Court has consistently sided with the capitalist class and the political establishment to stop her office from pushing for much needed reforms, and instead has sided with an outrageously undemocratic, blatantly right-wing recall campaign against her, directly supporting the wave of right-wing voter suppression that's sweeping the country. You'll hear more about that in a little bit. But in Minneapolis, the establishment Democrats have no qualms about making empty promises, as Tamara was saying, like abolishing the police to placate mass struggle, and then not only walking back on those promises at the first possible moment, but also teaming up with the courts to actively block measures like rent control, which would concretely improve the lives of the city's most marginalized communities. So again and again, we see Democrats pay lip service to our movements in order to push their lesser evil rhetoric. But when push comes to shove, they lean on the courts, progressive or otherwise, as an excuse to block our demands. And the biggest questions of our generation, like climate change, cannot be solved through mere legalistic means, no matter how progressive the courts, because the corporations who are squarely responsible for climate change always have and always will lobby ferociously to skew the laws in their favor until they are free to continue exploiting our environment for their short-term profit as they please. Nor does the capitalist court system and the logic of lesser evilism have any answer to the growth of the right. As other folks have talked about, this is an international problem, right? And on January 6th, sporadic arrests of a few extremists have ultimately done nothing to combat the deep disillusionment in the capitalist system that's driving people to the right, and that's spurred on by the graveyard of social movements that is the Democratic Party, which is crushing the kind of left alternatives that actually combat these right-wing ideas. So we must be clear, the courts have never been the answer to the most pressing questions for working people. Many of the greatest reforms in the history of the United States, including Roe v. Wade, to say nothing of the rest of the world, right, have been won under right-wing courts and administrations. Those victories, just as the fights before us today, are not the result of individual judges discovering some new interpretation within the Constitution, but in reality are the direct result of mass multiracial, multi-gender, working class struggle that forces the establishment's hand. That's what it took to fight then, and that's what it'll take now. So when the establishment politicians tell us to wait while the levers of justice do their work as neutral arbiters, right, and make excuses for our suffering by saying that they're just upholding the law, well, to that we'll say that the law is not neutral. And so the capitalist courts and the corporate politicians who write and enforce those laws are not neutral either. From racist traffic stops to the repeal of Roe v. Wade, in all areas, it is clear that the capitalists and their courts and their politicians offer no way forward for our movements, for our demands, or for our lives. We face mounting existential crises as working people, as women, as LGBTQ people, Black people, immigrants, and we cannot afford to have illusions that the capitalist courts, the politicians, or the laws will be at all neutral in our fight for progress and liberation. History shows and the present moment demands that we must get organized and fight for ourselves. Real change has never come from corporate super PACs and backroom political arithmetic, and it doesn't come from the most correct interpretation of a constitution that was written by and for capitalists themselves, right? Real change is a direct product of the strength of our movements. So we have to clearly link up our struggles to the fight against the system which perpetuates oppression and exploitation, the capitalist system, and fight for an alternative that's based not on democracy and justice for the 1% at the expense of the 99%, but on democracy and justice for the 100%. And if you want to join that fight, I suggest you start by joining Socialist Alternative. Thank you, everyone.
That was amazing, Ellen. You covered so many great points. And I also think, like you said, Roe v. Wade, what is happening in Texas and that domino effect, again, things don't just happen standalone. But like you said, the hopeful, optimistic part is that Roe v. Wade was won under a Nixon presidency and a conservative Supreme Court. If we pick up a struggle for women's LGBTQ reproductive rights, we can win, but it has to be, again, a socialist movement, a movement of the working class, working people. Thank you so much. That was great. And now a dog is barking in the background. Okay. Our next speaker is going to get to the main reason for why we are all here tonight. After she speaks, definitely stick around. There's more, we have 2 more speakers after Kshama. And they are going to talk a little bit about how do we fight this right-wing recall? How can we build a struggle or socialist movement? How do we enter the struggle? How do we fight? How do we win? But the next speaker is unfortunately going through an undemocratic. I have like a couple swear words in my mind to describe this, but I won't say them in this rally. A right-wing recall smear campaign against her. She has been reelected as city council member in Seattle since 2013, has taxed Amazon, has a socialist Marxist organization behind her, and has won real victories for working people. So I would like to introduce Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant.
Thank you, Megan. Good evening, everyone. Humanity and the planet are at a crossroads. Capitalism has no answers to the multiple crises facing humanity, from the COVID crisis to the housing crisis to the climate crisis. It is a system that puts profits before human health and lives, even in the midst of a devastating pandemic. American billionaires have added nearly $2 trillion to their wealth at the same time that they have denied hazard pay and basic safety to workers. This summer saw a grotesque display of this wealth as billionaires launched themselves into space. Even before Jeff Bezos took off, over 130,000 working people signed a petition saying that Bezos should not bother returning to Earth, which was a joke, but a very serious one, I think. Working people, young people, oppressed people across the globe face misery with lack of access to adequate healthcare and affordable housing at the hands of this rapacious ruling class. They face a tidal wave of evictions, and with the end of the eviction moratoriums in the United States and the piling up of nearly $17 billion in rental debt. This summer is on pace to again be the hottest ever on record in the United States. Here in Seattle, we saw the highest temperatures in the history of record keeping 3 days in a row. Wildfires on the west coast of the country have become a permanent feature. Hurricane Ida and the unprecedented travel over land to first devastate the Gulf and then flood New York with more destruction shows how far-reaching and rapid the effects can be. A new study released this summer shows that already climate change is linked to an estimated 5 million deaths annually. In the jaw-dropping new report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we are told that in one of its 5 scenarios, by the end of this century, the temperature will rise by up to 5.7 degrees Celsius, accompanied by an extreme sea level rise. This would mean that unless we urgently win an alternative to capitalism, we will see catastrophe during the lifetimes of some of the young people present here tonight. It will mean mass climate migration from areas that will become literally unlivable. The stakes could not be higher. History shows that there is only one way to win fundamental change: for working people and young people to build fighting mass movements and to build their own power through new organizations and parties rooted in struggle. This is the path of class struggle, of the working class against the capitalist class. It is class struggle that won the 8-hour workday, that forced FDR to pass the New Deal programs and lasting reforms like Social Security, that in many Western nations won socialized medicine and major social democratic reforms under the threat of revolution. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote in the Communist Manifesto that The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. They explain that this dynamic, this tension between classes is built into the bankrupt capitalist system. And if working people don't get organized and fight, that will not stop the attacks on us by the ruling class. It will only encourage them. We urgently need to build our power as the working class to fight to win a different world. Worker strikes are beginning to show the way forward. Nabisco workers are fighting for themselves and for all of us. Healthcare workers have been at the forefront of recent struggles for safe conditions. We need to bring these methods into all of our social movements, including BLM, mass action to disrupt capitalist business as usual. Here in Seattle, Socialist Alternative and I have used our council office to set an example of class struggle and what it can achieve. Through our movements in Seattle, we have been able to win unheard of victories. This began with making Seattle the first major city to win the $15 minimum wage. We did this by building a determined movement independent of the Democrats and the political establishment, a movement that allowed us to force many labor leaders to stand with us despite their reluctance and their close ties to the establishment. It spread from here around the country and became an example that offensive victories are possible in a period that had been characterized by so many defeats and setbacks. We have won an incredible number of renters' rights, many of them first in the nation victories. In a rare, honest statement from the ruling class, former real estate lobbyist Jamie Durkin, yes, he is brother to Seattle's tear gassing mayor, corporate Democrat Jenny Durkin. Jamie Durkin said that every dollar spent by the corporate landlords on lobbying the Seattle City Council was wasted because the other council members were afraid of quote unquote Sawant's army. He was dead right about that. Last year, we won the Amazon tax, $2 billion over the next decade for affordable housing and Green New Deal programs. These were victories of the movements and the struggles we built. Democratic Party politicians have fought us every step of the way. Because of our position and role, the Democrats are often forced to talk a good game, but even on issues where they have made progressive promises, it is stunning to see not only their inaction on progress, but their dogged obstruction of our efforts. With no Republicans in government for decades, this liberal city is nowhere near its climate goals. In fact, it has scandalously gone backward. The only funding of any significance for Green New Deal programs was won through our Amazon tax, which the progressive Democrats attempted to undermine with open and behind the scenes tactics until the strength of our movement forced them to concede. And since then, they've tried to shamelessly take credit for the victory. Our struggle is an international one. The upcoming COP26 climate summit in November in Glasgow will be an important opening for mass struggle. International Socialist Alternative will be there. The fight against climate change must be connected to rebuilding a militant labor movement. We need to fight for a just transition and clean energy jobs for all fossil fuel workers, for a socialist Green New Deal that includes massive taxes on big business and the rich to fund an immediate move to a clean energy economy that can create millions of union jobs. We need to take the big energy corporations into democratic public ownership because we cannot control what we don't own. We need Medicare for all, including free reproductive care and abortion. We need rent control and a massive expansion of affordable social housing nationally to cancel COVID debt and to take the housing controlled by fewer and fewer corporate landlords into democratic public ownership. We see in the collapse of the Biden honeymoon a further emboldening of the right wing, and now with the Supreme Court's upholding of the vicious Texas abortion ban, the right wing is ramping up its attacks on reproductive rights across the nation. This is alongside the right wing attacks on voting rights and the right to protest as part of the backlash against the biggest protest movement in US history with Black Lives Matter last summer, when 20 million people protested after the racist police murder of George Floyd. In the wake of the BLM movement, we can see that to win real change, we need leadership that provides a class struggle movement building strategy. Promises made by Democratic mayors and Democratic City Council members, as Tamar pointed out, under pressure from the street protests, were blatantly walked back once the movement had subsided. The squad was elected with broad hopes of millions of young people, but it has failed to so far provide a left alternative leadership. The Squad and Bernie Sanders have instead essentially formed an alliance with Biden and Pelosi. Their refusal to chart an independent fighting course is confusing and demoralizing to many. Their refusal to fight for a $15 minimum wage and Medicare for all, and to stand up to Biden, instead offering apologetics for Biden, creates further space for right populism to pose as the only alternative to the broken status quo. Why have the Squad chosen this path? Will they change course? We cannot be mind readers, but one thing we do know, it is easy for progressive elected representatives to become ineffective if they fail to base themselves on movements, because that is the only way to overcome the relentless pressure you come under to go along with the Democratic leadership. The Squad appears to have chosen the path of conciliation, and though we hope they will change course, and we will continue to publicly call on them to change course, we cannot afford to wait for them. There is a real danger that in the midst of growing anger at inequality and inaction, in this age of disorder and capitalist crisis, that the sway of the right wing becomes greater and greater. The disappointment in Biden could lead to right-wing Republicans retaking the Senate and even the House in the midterm elections next year, setting the stage for Trump 2024. The ruling class tries both to co-opt those elected to power and to block the development of movements. The backlash against Black Lives Matter is a bipartisan one. And it is not only the political establishment, but every institution of capitalism that is being used against our movements, including here in Seattle, against our Socialist Council office. As Ellen explained, what happened in Texas with the brutal anti-abortion law and also with the eviction moratoriums shows we cannot trust the capitalist courts to stand up for justice. The right-wing and big business-led recall effort against our Marxist City Council office has gone forward only with the help of the capitalist courts. My crime, standing unambiguously with the Black Lives Matter movement and using our office to win the Amazon tax. The Washington State Supreme Court has put its stamp of approval on this attack on the right to protest and on social movements. That same court rejected the justified grassroots recall effort against Mayor Jenny Durkan for overseeing the brutalization and tear gassing of BLM protesters last summer. That same court unanimously threw out the case against a local sheriff, John Snazza, for refusing to enforce the mask mandate with his police officers. But none of this is new. In 1919, American socialist Eugene Debs was sentenced to a decade in prison for protesting World War I, a sentence upheld by the US Supreme Court. We should not be surprised by the right-wing rulings of the courts, whether then or now, whether in Texas or Washington State or Washington, D.C. The courts under capitalism belong to the capitalist class, and when the stakes are high enough, will deliver right-wing and anti-worker rulings to defend their system. In fact, the Supreme Court inexplicably delayed its ruling on our recall by nearly 3 months at the same time that it was ruling on case after case. By doing this, the court has handed the recall campaign the excuse to avoid being on the ballot in a normal November election when we would have gotten record high turnout 3 times, and we have done so 3 times to elect myself as an open socialist. Instead, we will now have a winter special election with up to 50% lower turnout, possibly, to make it an older, whiter, wealthier electorate that votes. This is voter suppression, plain and simple. But we are going to fight back with class struggle movement building socialist methods. As we defend our council position, we are also going on the offensive. We are building maximum possible pressure for rent control through a petition drive and the Rent Control Now rally next Saturday. Winning rent control will mean overcoming the opposition of the Democrats, as has winning virtually everything we have won. Where do the current Democratic council members stand in Seattle against the recall? Not one of them has said a word against it. This is in spite of the fact that there is little doubt that if the recall is successful, big business will go on the attack against even milquetoast progressives next, as it did in 2019 when it attempted so blatantly to buy Seattle City Hall. If we are to wage serious battles nationally and internationally, we will need rallies and protests and strikes. Yes, absolutely. But if we fight without a political party, then we will have one hand tied behind our backs. We need a new party for working people now more than ever. The approach of reasonable incremental change, or reasonable sounding incremental change, let's say, advocated by the Democrats, is not only not up to the scale of the crisis we face, it is a policy for inaction and disaster. We cannot wait. We need unions, community groups, women's movements, BLM, socialists to join together and form a new party that takes no corporate cash and has fighting demands and is rooted in movements. Socialist Alternative is prepared to work with all genuine fighters on the left to make steps to form a new party, and we will work with many rank and file Democrats, as we do now, who do not see yet the urgent need to break with their misleaders. At the same time that we stand shoulder to shoulder with all workers and oppressed people in struggle, we know that capitalism is the root cause of the crises we face. This is a global system, and we stand in solidarity with International Socialist Alternative, our worldwide revolutionary party dedicated to ending capitalism globally. This pandemic is international. Environmental destruction is international. The working class is international, and our movement must be too. If you are not already a member, consider joining Socialist Alternative. We are fighting against the right wing in the here and now and for far-reaching change while we organize and educate ourselves about how to defeat capitalism once and for all and win a socialist world. Solidarity.
Wow, yes, love it. I saw someone in the chat say it's extremely satisfying to know that establishment politicians are scared of us, and they should be, yes. This was also a great reminder, as Kshama pointed out. There is a sense of urgency because we have climate catastrophe happening around us right now, and capitalism is the system that is causing, as Kshama said, environmental destruction. We need a new system, not green capitalism, not working people, not using straws, the Exxon still spilling oil. So yes, and again, join Socialist Alternative. I also think something that Kshama was talking about was who is fighting us in Seattle right now. We have a team on the ground, Socialist Alternative members, but then also campaign members of working class people. They have jobs, they are socialists, going up against the likes of Jeff Bezos, a man who will go to space for fun, billionaires, Republican donors, Trump donors, fighting Marxists because they are sore losers. They've lost like 3 times now. And so now, as Kshama was saying, they've basically resorted to just dirty tricks, trumped up charges. That's basically what we're dealing with. And all because of Kshama standing with BLM, taxing Amazon, and actually fighting the status quo. So one of those members that is on the ground is the finance director for the Kshama Solidarity Campaign, Hannah. Hannah, you can take it away. Stick around. I know Kshama was like, oh, how do you top that? But Hannah is going to top it somehow. So go ahead.
We'll try our best, won't we? Thanks so much, Megan. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out to our rally today. I think Kshama did a great job laying out the national situation that the recall against her is situated within and the stakes at hand. We need a new party for working people linked up with an international socialist movement. And a critical part of that right now is to defend the office of the nation's only elected Marxist. So I'm here to tell you how you can get involved. But I want to back up a little bit and talk about exactly why the billionaire class and the right wing are so desperate to remove Kshama Sawant from office in particular. Why have they resorted to bending the law so severely, totally exposing the justice system under capitalism for what it is, a tool of the ruling class to maintain power? The billionaires in the right wing have never been happy that a socialist was elected to the Seattle City Council, but they were furious once she proved that she was actually effective in winning the platform that she ran on. Kshama's office has spearheaded victories that have set a precedent for what working people can win, with the country's first $15 minimum wage, the Amazon tax, a first-in-nation ban on police use of chemical weapons, and countless renters' rights victories. I really can't even say everything that we've won in Seattle. The billionaires obviously don't like any of those things. They cut into their profits, but they, along with the political establishment, have fought those measures tooth and nail. But that's not really what they're afraid of. A modest tax on their enormous wealth, or a lone socialist on the Seattle City Council. What they're most afraid of is us. They're afraid of working people getting together and recognizing the tremendous power that we have when we get organized. And Kshama's office has demonstrated that power time and time again with concrete victories to prove it. Our approach in Seattle represents a way of doing politics that is fundamentally different from all other elected officials. Kshama isn't lobbying other politicians for their votes or making backroom deals. That's just not an effective strategy. It's movements of working people and youth that win change. We've won our victories in Seattle through organizing mass meetings to democratically decide the way forward for the movement, taking to the streets, organizing in our workplaces, and forcing the hand of the political establishment. That's how we won 15, that's how we won the Amazon tax, and that's how we're fighting now to win rent control. And the fact that we've won tangible gains has meant that we've been able to broadcast across the world loud and clear that it's class struggle that gets the goods. That is what makes Kshama Sawant such a dangerous politician in the eyes of the billionaires. The fact that her office serves as a beacon for struggle for all working people. So it's in this context that multinational corporations actually broke records and spent over $4 million in a local election in corporate PAC money trying to defeat Kshama in her last re-election. Amazon dropped $1 million in a single day. Despite that, we built a movement that was powerful enough to cut across the billionaire funding, the corporate media attacks, and Seattle voters elected Kshama for her third term. Our movement also broke our own fundraising records, both for the amount of money that we raised, and then also for the amount of individuals who donated to the local campaign. And then we used the momentum that we built out of that victory to go on and win an unprecedented tax on big businesses like Amazon. We sucker punched Jeff Bezos, not once, but twice in a row, defeating Amazon's $1 million money bomb and then winning the Amazon tax. Billionaires like Jeff Bezos are incredibly angry that they couldn't just buy the last election in Seattle. So now they've thrown their support behind this totally baseless, anti-democratic and right-wing recall campaign. They're attacking Kshama with false charges on the basis of her support for the Black Lives Matter movement and the Tax Amazon movement. They're attacking her on the basis that she has fought unwaveringly for working people and alongside our movements, which is exactly why Seattle voters have elected her 3 times now, like I said. Essentially, the billionaires want to overturn the election that they couldn't buy. Defending against this recall attack has been a very long battle. It's been full of twists and turns. Some of you might just be hearing about Kshama and the recall for the first time today. But many of you here have been here since day one. That was a full year ago when we first launched the Kshama Solidarity Campaign. And the dedication of everyone who's gotten involved in this fight so far has been truly inspiring. It's been an uphill, protracted struggle the whole way. We've dealt with not only the complications of canvassing during a pandemic, but we wrestled with the maneuvers of the unjust legal system, like the Supreme Court's month-long delay on their decision of whether or not to throw out the recall. And once the recall campaign had enough signatures to qualify for the ballot, they just sat on them, intentionally pushing this beyond the November election to a low turnout winter special election, suppressing the vote of thousands of working and young people and voters of color. Now that the recall has just submitted their signatures to get an election on the ballot, the end is nearly in sight. And that means we can't afford to let off the gas, not one single bit. In order to win in the face of the recall's voter suppression, we'll need to build the biggest get out the vote operation that Seattle has ever seen. And in order to make that happen, we need to continue to have record-breaking fundraising. And that's why we've set a really ambitious goal today of raising $30,000 at this fundraising appeal. I'm gonna just let that sit for a minute. That is a lot of money. On January 9th of this year, we had our most successful fundraising appeal for the Kshama Solidarity campaign to date. So we raised $27,000 at that event. So it's possible, you know, we've gotten big amounts before, but my challenge to all of you is let's see if we can beat that today. So we raised that at a big virtual rally in anticipation of the Supreme Court's decision of whether or not they'd throw out the recall case, which again, they delayed, they ended up announcing it in April. So we raised $27,000 before we had the Supreme Court's decision, before the recall committed voter suppression, and before the recall even submitted their signatures. We've always had the perspective that this recall would be allowed to proceed, but now the recall threat is laid out before us more concretely than ever before. The election's on the horizon, and that means that it's crunch time for our fundraising. So in a second, I'm going to start calling out some numbers. If you're able to give one of those numbers that I call out, post your pledge in the chat, let everybody know, cheer each other on, and then go to the donation link that should be posted or is going to be posted soon. Make your donation right away. That's super helpful. Hopefully we can count up and see how well we do. And then if you'd like to break up your donation as a recurring one, we still have at least 5 more months where we'll be collecting donations. So just choose the monthly option on our website. It's like a little box you can check. And that can be a really great way to give a bigger amount, over the course of those months than maybe you could if you were trying to give it all today. And then if you need to check how much you've donated so far, at least if you're on the Zoom call with us here, you can private message Madeline. Just send her your full name and then she can check. And then hopefully that's helpful. Like I said earlier, this has been a long campaign. It's been a year long so far. I know that a lot of people here have already made the maximum contribution to the Solidarity campaign, or maybe you're very close. So I want to let you know ahead of time that we're about to have an appeal for Socialist Alternative to make donations to that organization right afterward. So anyone who's reached the max should definitely consider giving during Algiers' appeal. The same thing goes if you're not a US citizen. Unfortunately, you can't donate to the Solidarity campaign, but please consider funding the organization that is fighting for 15, taxing the rich, rent control, and so much more on the national scale. So I'm going to start big because the opposition that we're facing is also really big. We're up against some of the wealthiest people in the world who would love to see an end to determined class struggle. The donors to the recall campaign include some of the most notorious union busters in Seattle, along with over 500 Republican donors and over 160 Trump donors. And they say, there's no Republicans in Seattle. We've got the donors to prove it. So let's take a look at 3 very special donors who have all given the maximum donation of $1,000 to the campaign. First, we have former Boeing CEO, Frank Schranz. In Schranz's 10 years as CEO, he waged war on Boeing machinists, the Boeing Machinists Union. He oversaw layoffs of 36,000 workers in the Seattle area. These are good union jobs, and provoked the 2nd and 3rd biggest strikes in all of the company's history. So Frank Schranz has maxed out to the recall. He's given $1,000. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jeannie Nordstrom. You might recognize her name. She's a member of the billionaire Nordstrom family. So this is one of the top 3 billionaire dynasties in Washington state, all 3 of which a member of that it has donated to this recall campaign. The Nordstroms engaged in illegal union busting back in the 1990s. They drove UFCW out of their stores. And again, Nordstrom has maxed out to the recall. Last but not least, there's someone named George Petrie. So he's the head of Goodman Real Estate. That's the most evicting landlord in all of Seattle. He's also the biggest Trump donor in Washington state. So every month, he continues to donate thousands of dollars to the Trump Victory Fund. But his funding of right-wing initiatives doesn't stop there. He has also maxed out to the recall campaign against Kshama. So Petrie can donate thousands of dollars per month to Trump like it's nothing. He's a corporate landlord. I know I don't have thousands of dollars to throw around. but many people across the country have been making huge sacrifices by maxing out to the Kshama Solidarity campaign. Many people have done that by setting up monthly recurring donations, so that you can reach $1,000 total by the end of the campaign. So here's my first big ask. Is there anyone here who can give the maximum donation today of $1,000 to the Kshama Solidarity campaign? See, someone just maxed out. Awesome. We do need a Kshama in Oakland, California. You should also post in the chat if you can top up your existing donation to reach $1,000 total. Again, you can message Madeline if you would like to do that. And then you can also set up a recurring donation to get you to $1,000 by the end of the campaign. If you can do any three of those things, please put your name in the chat. And I'm sure I've missed people while I've been talking. Nice. Thank you so much, Michael. I see Ellen as well. Awesome. That's awesome. Love to see it. Yeah, a lot of people have made donations already. So again, if you are reaching 1,000 by virtue of making a new donation, even if it's just $100, $5, maybe you were really close to the $1,000 threshold. All of that is awesome. And you should let us know in the chat just so we can see how much support we have out there. Really awesome solidarity, guys. Thank you so much. So I want us all to take a moment and think back to 2013 when Kshama was first elected. 7 years ago, socialist politics weren't nearly as popular as they are now, but we managed to elect Kshama on the promise of a $15 minimum wage, and then we won that right afterward. After Kshama's initial victory, we saw figures like Bernie, AOC, the Squad all explode into popular consciousness. Now the DSA has grown to over 90,000 members, and hundreds of thousands of workers and youth are proudly taking up the label of socialist. The moment is ripe to grow the socialist movement, and the moment is also incredibly urgent to grow it. But losing Kshama's seat would be a major setback. The ruling class would absolutely love to write our epitaph to say that it's Kshama's bold fighting socialist approach that was her undoing in the end. That socialism was okay just in Seattle for a little bit of time, but that ultimately it's a dead-end road. We absolutely cannot afford for working people to be fed that message by the corporate media at a time when millions are searching for an alternative to the rotten capitalist system with climate catastrophe looming. And that means we have to come together to make big sacrifices in order to defeat this right-wing recall. So is there anyone here today who can make a $500 donation or more to the campaign to make sure that we keep Kshama's office as a beacon for socialist struggle? I know a lot of people have maybe given about that amount on the road to maxing out. So I see another 500 though from someone in Boston. It looks like there's a group of people together. That is amazing. Thank you so much. Hold it a little bit in case anyone else wants to make a $500 donation. Now, again, that could be $100 per month for the next 5 months. Consider it. Maybe that's something you can do. Got another person who's giving 145 to max out, 850 to max out. That's awesome. Again, you can talk to Maddie/Madeline, which is her name on the Zoom, if you want to check your donation total and make sure that you don't go over the limit, because it's just a slight logistic headache, but it's not a big deal. Cool. Anyone else for 500? Awesome. Amanda's doing $100 a month until the campaign ends. $500, $600, whatever that shakes out to. We'll see when we get an election date. So like I said in my introduction, what the ruling class fears most is the fact that working people are getting organized. In response to the George Floyd rebellion, the biggest protest movement in US history, they're lashing out. The attack against Kshama's office is part of a broader right-wing backlash against Black Lives Matter and progressive movements generally. Nationwide, in response to millions of people protesting for justice for George Floyd, the political establishment made empty promises to try to get the movements off of the streets. In Minneapolis, the city council went as far as saying that they would abolish the police. Naturally, this was all lip service. It didn't amount to them even reforming their police department. I think Megan said the police were not defunded, despite people thinking, maybe they were. But things went a little differently in Seattle because we have an independent socialist council member who understands the power of mass movements. We were able to win concrete gains out of those protests. Kshama's office put forward a bill that banned police from using tear gas and other so-called crowd control weapons on protesters, and we actually won it. It's worth noting that the rest of the city council then shamefully drove loopholes through the bill shortly thereafter. It happens, but that's why we need more elected officials like Kshama, not less, who boldly fight for our movement's demands. Can anyone here donate $250 or more so that we can build the strongest fight for the demands of the Black Lives Matter movement, like defunding the police, not just in Seattle, but nationwide? Probably. All right, we got Nick doing 250. I probably missed some other ones. 300. Fantastic. Awesome. I see Mandy's donating as well. What's the math on that one? You could break it up, $50 over 5 months, or whatever. It's hard to break up 250 in another way, but you could do 300 divided by 50. Yeah, wait, no, that's still okay. So ignore that. The math is basically you could give 50 a month if you want to do this amount. That's awesome. Cool. I see Jesse giving 200 as well, or 250, 250, some iteration of that. Awesome. This is lovely. So as Kshama outlined before me, the situation around climate change is incredibly dire. To avoid climate catastrophe and prevent the suffering and displacement of millions, we urgently need a Green New Deal to end the use of fossil fuels and rapidly transition to 100% renewable energy. Now, this will require massive clean energy and a massive clean energy and union jobs program that would dwarf the scale of Biden's watered down $1.3 trillion infrastructure bill. And to win that, we need a fighting movement and political leaders willing to go head to head with big energy corporations. That would include taking them into democratic public ownership so that we can actually shut down fossil fuel production and use those massive resources to produce clean energy. That's the only way it's going to happen. The right-wing recall against Kshama is a threat to all of our past victories, 15, the Amazon tax, everything, but it's also a threat to future victories like a Green New Deal jobs program, which would be totally necessary to win a livable planet for all of us. So is there anyone here who can donate $100 or more today to help us build the fight for a socialist Green New Deal in Seattle? Cool, I missed 200 from Audrey, love it. We got Andrew and or Susie giving $100, 200 from Hannah F, 150 from Stephanie, love to see it. Cool. Wow. Yeah, I can't keep up with you guys. This is awesome. And I'm sure there's other people on YouTube and Facebook that we're not seeing in this Zoom chat that I'm looking at, but 100 is really the number that we're hitting a lot of people from here. Yeah, okay, it was Andrew and Susie. Love it. Cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna wait a little bit for all these to keep going. It takes a little bit to type. And again, you could make that as a recurring donation. $100 is a lot of money. Maybe you do $20 for the next 5 months, you know, if you were considering giving 20 just one time. All right, cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Speaking of future victories, right now Kshama's office is fighting to win rent control, which would make it illegal for landlords to raise the price of rent for any unit higher than the rate of inflation. So if we win it in Seattle, we could really see it spread across the country, just like 15, we won it in Seattle, and then Minneapolis won it. The struggle to tax the rich is something that Socialist Alternative is leading up. We won it in Seattle, and now people are leading it in Chicago, in Burbank, California. People really want to tax Amazon. So setting ourselves up for the best possible shot at winning rent control meant building momentum. To build that momentum, we fought for, and we've also won, a series of historic renters' rights bills through Kshama's office these past few months. Educators and families organized this summer alongside Kshama's office to win an unprecedented ban on evictions of students and school staff during the school year. That's most of the year, and that's, you know, most everyone who comes into contact with a school. We won rights for tenants to renew their leases. We also won the right to free legal counsel for renters facing eviction. And we're using all of these victories to propel us forward in the fight for rent control. But losing Kshama's office would severely cut across our chances of winning rent control in Seattle and beyond. We need to keep that momentum. And the recall obviously wants Kshama out before any of that happens. So is there anyone here who can give $50 or more today to help us keep our momentum in the fight for rent control and renters' rights nationwide? Got 75, that's awesome. I missed some other hundreds. Again, maybe you can do $10 over the next 5 months. Cool, we've got 50, 100, 50 from Dakota. Cool, 50 over 2 months, there you go, we got another 100 right there. That's awesome, cool. So I know I've made a lot of really big asks today, but we want everyone to chip in whatever they can. Most people can't give $1,000, but every single donation that working people can give to the Kshama Solidarity Campaign is absolutely vital. Whether it's, you know, that $1,000 donation or if it's just $1. Everything we've won in Seattle has been the result of a mass movement. We only beat the billionaires in 2019 by breaking a record for how many people donated to Kshama's re-election campaign, with nearly 8,000 donors. Now, 2 days ago, we just beat our own record for donors to this campaign, and we need to keep going if we want to defeat the recall. So is there anyone here who can give $15 or any amount for the Socialist who won 15? All right, we got a $500 donation from YouTube, 30 from James. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people have already given too, so for the sake of time, I will pass it back to Megan so that we can move on to the next one. But this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, for donating in solidarity.
Amazing. I hope someone else is doing the math and not me, because I'd somehow come up with like $20, which is not the case. That was great. We've had speakers from Brazil, Philly, New York, Seattle. I wish this was in person, and then I would shout something like, are we gonna let them get away with it? And then everyone would be like, no. But I'm glad that we do have, we're able to make it international on Zoom today. So we have one last speaker. He's also from New York. He is an elected member of Socialist Alternative's national leadership and one of the Black Caucus conveners. Algier, I will let you lead off. I think you're still muted. Yeah.
Technology. Sisters and brothers, friends, siblings, and comrades, 2021 marks a year thus far of a new administration, from Trump to Biden. But for working people, we face the same reality, rooted in capitalist crisis and legitimacy, social class polarization, and deep questions that hang over working people. Internationally, the working class, the poor, and the oppressed is asking the question, how do we deal with COVID-19 and the Delta variant? How do we face off endemic poverty, systematic or systemic oppression, and environmental destruction? How do we imagine a new world that is unique to ourselves as workers and youth, rooted in solidarity, social struggle, and socialism globally? This year marks key anniversaries that strengthens our resolve and feeds our revolutionary vision. It was 230 years ago that the Haitian Revolution began in 1791. It was 1871 when the Paris Commune was brought down in blood. It was 50 years ago that George Jackson, the prison organizer and theorist, was taken away from us. But it was in that death that the Attica prison uprising took place this very weekend. It was 48 years ago that we saw the coup d'etat in Chile. And tragically, 20 years ago, we saw the World Trade Center bombing taking place, which was a defeat for the international working class from New York City to Washington, D.C., to Afghanistan, to Iraq. But also it saw the end of the anti-globalization movement. But it was 10 years ago that a new paradigm opened up. We call it Occupy Wall Street. It was during the period of the Arab Spring that brought down the most brutal dictatorships in the Middle East and in Africa. We saw the Battle of Wisconsin that challenged Scott Walker's undemocratic methods of disarming the working class with their own trade unions. And it was Occupy Wall Street that began the illustrious political work of Kshama Sawant. In 2012, we ran against Frank Chop for the State House in Olympia, and we garnered 20,000 votes. We might have lost on that day, but we won because in 2013, we came back and won the city council. Those limited historical events and developments is punctuated by the nature and the evolution of the revolutionary forces at the time, and also the building of the international working class from that historical moment to today. Today, the urgent task is to build and fortify our small but vital forces of revolutionary Marxism. It is crucial and decisive as the forces of hate and reaction attempt to usher a dreary, cold, and dark winter over America and the world, growing with figures like Brazil's Bolsonaro, India's Modi, and of course, the Republican Party and Trumpism in our own country. In the Lone Star State of Texas, the political establishment has taken a jackhammer to the right of reproduction and women's rights. As the historic victory of Roe versus Wade from 1973 is chiseled away, as the Democratic Party locally and nationally pay lip service to the defending of Roe versus Wade, their passivity speaks to the urgent need of building a new party for the working class and poor, but also building a mass movement. In fact, it was Houston Socialist Alternative as the only organization to call for a rally in the Lone Star State. The historical role of the socialist movement dating back to the 1930s, the 1940s, and the 1920s in fighting against all forms of oppression and exploitation under capitalism is well documented, but it's not documented enough about the work of Socialist Alternative. In this moment of triple crisis, of COVID-19, of racial and law enforcement terror, and economic crisis, our organization continued to produce, even in the midst of a lockdown, of a monthly newspaper to reach to the working class and the poor and the youth around the vital issues facing them in this triple crisis. We talked about and organized during the George Floyd rebellion. We went down to Bessemer, Alabama to organize with the workers in Amazon. We led the struggle on the question of tax Amazon, not only in Seattle, but now in Burbank, California. We are at the front lines on the question of environmental crisis and destruction that in fact places all of us in harm's way. In fact, we organize on the internet and online. Workers speak out who are organizing in the midst of the crisis of COVID-19 and mobilizing and organizing and agitating around renters' rights, both in New York and Minneapolis and Seattle, Washington. This pioneering work is not only in our established branches of Socialist Alternative, it is deep in the South, like New Orleans. It's in the Midwest. It's in the rural areas of this nation. It's in the suburban landscapes and the urban centers of this country. It is important for our members and our branches of Socialist Alternative to be able to articulate a program that links up with the consciousness of the working class, the poor, and the youth, where their consciousness would vary from state to state, from city to city. And that is why it is crucial for our comrades to be able to speak the language of the working class, to sink deeper roots among the working class, the poor, and the oppressed across the country. Union organizing, there's a crisis in the labor movement, lower union density, a leadership that seems passive, a consciousness among workers that seems confused on so many different fronts. But there's a greater favorability on the views of unions and of utilizing the weapon of the strike. In fact, the union, and we must be clear about this question, the union and the existence of a union is in fact the tool to democratize the most undemocratic site on the planet, and that is the workplace. Amazon and Bessemer, the recent strikes across the Midwest strikes and boycotts. In New York City alone, several of our members are leading union organizing drives. They're leading campaigns. They're taking leadership of this working class institution, our organization. And for us, unions is not a secondary issue, but a crucial question to rebuild a fighting labor movement, a fighting working class struggle to challenge corporate power and the capitalist order. We have stated we are in the midst of a low ebb of class struggle, but the potential of a deeper political revolutionary consciousness alongside right-wing ideas is ever present. To confront this moment means we must invest everything we have to build a mighty revolutionary Marxist organization and international in the belly of the beast. So let's concretize and place it in the moment we are fighting to keep the only genuine revolutionary Marxists in the halls of corporate power, the den of jackals and criminals. Kshama and Essay's record on all key features and battles in our struggle against capitalism and its parties, Democrats and Republicans, has been and continue will be unwavering, awe-inspiring, rooted in the potential power of the working class, the youth, and the labor movement who's organized on a daily basis. To end this system of death and destruction, capitalism, there will be no shortcuts. There will be no Facebook page constructed. There will be no Google search to let you know how to do it. There will be no cliff notes at the end of the meeting. In fact, it will be uncompromising social struggle for the working class, organizing, mobilizing, agitating, articulating a revolutionary program taken from the class for a dialogue and a debate within our class brought back to the organization in our branches, among our national and international leadership, rooted in our perspectives, that in fact, when the working class rises up, they can defeat anything that stands in its way. I can give you many reasons to give to our organization, Socialist Alternative. But I want you to think about that moment when the boss attacked you and your co-workers for organizing. I want you to think about when the boss gave you a pink slip during the holidays. I want you to think about the homeless person on the street when you have empty apartments standing idle. I want you to think about that time you saw Eric Garner have his last breath taken out of his life with his body. I want you to think about that moment. And I want you to think about how you felt when you saw the bombs in Iraq or the bombs in Afghanistan. I want you to think about that, because when you came to Socialist Alternative, I want you to think about how you felt when you went to a meeting and you said, I'm in a meeting with like-minded people that see the world as I see it, that answered the hard questions that you had on your mind for months until years, that said all the things that I was taught, all the things I was socialized under, that this organization, these ideas began to say that I'm not crazy, but in fact, I'm sane, and that I want to change the world. So comrades, siblings, brothers and sisters, I want you to think about this. And I want to ask you, on this day, Sunday, September 12th, 2021, how much can you give to your organization, to our organization, an investment into building a new world, a socialist world, on the potential revolutionary power of the international working class, the poor and the oppressed, that when the history of victory is written, this present and future generation will highlight the role of Socialist Alternative and International Socialist Alternative as the direct heirs of Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and the Bolshevik Party of October 1917. So I ask you, and I'm gonna start high, who can give $1,000 to Socialist Alternative to continue organizing and agitating for the things that we need, the things that we want? Okay, I saw somebody give, I think I saw 11,000. If I'm not mistaken, put that back in because I want to shout that out. I saw $11,000 to the Socialist alternative. Right on, right on. Yes, yes. I'll keep that number in the air for a little bit, but I'm going to move on real quick. $11,000. All right on, right on. I saw a couple $10,000 already from Jack and Justin, I believe. Right on. Thank you. Thank you, siblings. Can we get another 10,000? Right on. Okay. I guess 10,000 is not the number. I've done this a lot, and I'm going to get to a number that you love so much that you won't be able to stop yourself. How about, let's see, $5,000. And mind you, you can do this in installments. It doesn't have to be all tonight. We don't want you to break the bank. And we don't want you to get in trouble with your partner that you haven't discussed with properly. You've been so inspired and moved that you want to give everything that you got to this movement and this struggle. $5,000. Did I see I thought I saw a 5,000 paid in installments. Am I right or wrong? Right on. Okay. Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 5,000. I'm gonna stay with 5,000 for one quick second. I know that's a lot of money. I know it's hard times, but we've been living in hard times for a long time under capitalism. Okay, I think that stopped. Like I said, I'm gonna get to a number that you love so much that you're gonna dig in your pockets, you're gonna give. How about $3,000, comrades, siblings, family? $3,000 to Socialist Alternative to continue the work that we've been doing in the South, in the Midwest, in the Southwest, the West Coast, in the East side of the nation. Okay, I guess 3,000 wasn't good for you. I'm gonna keep working now. You got me here sweating like an old Baptist preacher, but it's all right. That's all right. How about $2,000 to Socialist Alternative? You can donate to SA. It's in the chat. Use that link. $2,000. Oh, yes, there's no better investment. I can guarantee you we will use the money wisely in organizing and producing our newspaper, putting more full-time workers. Oh, right on, right on. The person can't make it, but will give $2,000 to SA and to the movement. How about $1,500? I see another, oh, somebody matched that 2,000. I saw that, right on. Right on. I saw how about 1,500? Let's try 1,500. Is there someone out there that can give $1,500 to Socialist Alternative? Oh, that's a beautiful thing. This work is about the babies. It's about our children. It's about the next generation. This is what this is about. Oh, yes, yes. All right, 1,500, right on, right on, right on. Okay, we got some beautiful numbers. We got some numbers coming in, beautiful messages. Right on. How about, I'm gonna move off of 1,500. Let's go $1,000. Keep in mind that 1,000 you can pay in installments. It doesn't have to be all tonight. We got some people just came through with some $1,000 to SA. Right on. I'm sticking with 1,000. I think there was I saw some numbers a little bit early. They were so enthusiastic. They were so moved that they couldn't help themselves. Oh, right on, another 1,000. They were so moved, they had to put the numbers in before I could even finish what I was saying. It's amazing. Any other $1,000? That's all right. Right on, right on. Thank you, thank you. Right on, thank you. $1,000. And I believe, oh, right on. Oh, right on. A couple more 1,000. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. A little special shout out. They're not here this evening, but some long-standing members, some pioneering members of Socialist Alternative Philadelphia, Marty and Justin Harrison, is going to donate $1,000 also to Socialist Alternative. So certainly give them a soul clap. I'm a kid. I'm old school, so my language is a little more different than the new school. Is there anyone else $1,000 before I move on? I don't want to keep you here too long, because you've been in Essays church here. I'm a socialist preacher. All right, how about $750 to Socialist Alternative, $750 to continue to build this movement. Oh, okay, another $1,000. Okay, right on, right on. $750. All right now. Go ahead now. You put numbers I even mentioned, and I like that. That's even more better. $750. Right on. Right on. $700. Right on. Right on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. $750. Oh, right on. Oh, that's right. That's right. Doing it for the babies. That's what this is about. This is all work. If that doesn't inspire you, I don't know what is going to inspire you. If it's not about that next generation that's walking behind us, they're inheriting the environmental destruction that they're faced with. They're inheriting the legacy of one of our comrades who unfortunately just recently passed. They will carry that legacy of revolutionary activity and organizing and agitating for the ideas of socialism and internationalism and solidarity. How about $500? Siblings, comrades, family, who can give $500 to the movement, to the struggle. I see it. Come on, keep it coming. That's right. We're doing this for our kids. My son will be 13 years old in November. And I have to speak to him differently than I speak to a lot of other folks, because he has to inherit not only the class that he belongs to, but the people he belongs to. And I must give him that historical legacy. I must continue that work. $500. Socialist Alternative, donate. 500. Okay, I know I'm getting close. Oh, another 500. I know I'm getting close now. Yeah, you guys sitting on the edge of your chairs. You just wait until I say that number, and all hell's gonna break loose. $500, right on. Okay, 500 seems to be nice for people. Okay, right on. Keep in mind, in installments, do not, I repeat, do not break the bank, because I don't want your partners to throw you out in the street. If you come home talking about, I gave all this money to the organization, and so make sure you discuss with your partners, make sure you discuss with the bank, make sure you got the money in the bank. 500. All right. I'm gonna, yes. I'm gonna jump off of that real quick. I'm gonna try another number, and I'm getting close. Let's try $400. We can give $400 to Socialist Alternative. People say, oh no. Oh, brother LJ, we can't go down that road. Okay. $400. Okay. I'm not gonna keep everybody here long. I just got about 3 or 4, 500. Right on. Thank you. That's a pioneering member of the New Orleans branch of Socialist Alternative. Very important branch, actually, in the work in the South, right? Also a city with major history in the class struggle. Okay. How about $200, comrades? $200. Okay. Now I found a number that people like. Now, so another 300, right on. Another 200, right on. 300, right on. Thank you. Yes, in the memory of our comrade Jeremy. Yes. $200, right on. $200. Thank you, comrade. Thank you. Keep that. Yes, indeed. $200. I dedicate my contribution to that comrade Jeremy, but when he hugged you, you felt the hug. That's called revolutionary love in the highest order. Right on. $200. Yes. $200. Okay, you're ready now. Here we go. Here's the number. The number you all been waiting for. Oh, $300. Thank you, comrade. Thank you so much. Oh, from YouTube. Okay, right on. I hope the comrades are keeping pace with all the numbers so we get precise numbers. And also if people want to do installment plans, make sure you do that. Very important. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna drop it. I'm dropping it like it's hot now. $100 to the Socialist Alternative Movement. Now I should see a lot of numbers and a lot of names. Now I'm pretty broke, but I know I can give $100. Right on. Thank you. Thank you so much, comrades. Yes, donate to SA. You guys got me in here working, but I'm all right. I feel good. $100 to the Socialist Alternative. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. 150. Once again, a comrade who gives a number that I don't say even makes me more happier. Right on. Thank you. Thank you, comrade. Thank you. $100. Oh, that's the number. I think that was the number we're getting to. Okay, how about $50? You can keep those hundreds coming, but I'm gonna go down to $50 now. Donate to SA. $50. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sibling. $50. Another amount? $50. $50. Oh, okay. Got another 100. They must have checked their bank accounts to make sure they got it and they put it back in. Right on. Thank you, comrades. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Any other amounts, comrades? You can throw your name in the chat. And certainly if you're a member of SA on the Zoom or watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can raise your dues by $5. You can indicate that in the chat, or by $10 or $20. It's going to be very important that you reach out to your branch organizer, to your BC, let them know there's going to be a change in your dues. Also, you can give dues, international solidarity dues as well to ISA. That's doing amazing work. You heard from a brilliant comrade from Brazil tonight, organizing and mobilizing against Bolsonaro, which is very vital actually in that struggle. So please, once again, throw your name in the chat. Whatever else you can give to SA is greatly appreciated. We will use that money wisely because our work is never done until capitalism is dismantled and all of the filth that comes along with it does not reside in our minds, in our hearts, and in our body, because we have a world to win, a socialist world. I thank you, comrades, and I bid you good night and peace.
Thank you so much, Algier. That was so inspiring. I'm sitting here like, oh my God, just seeing all these numbers rolling. I also, the lighting kind of makes me look like I'm gonna tell a ghost story. Let's make this right-wing recall a ghost, okay? I'm sick of it. Let's get it over with. Algier also brought up the paper. If you haven't subscribed yet, literally the first time I opened a socialist alternative newspaper, it was the first time I had ever seen a paper that was made by working people for working people with a socialist analysis. It's so important. We do have work to do. Like Algier said, this is for the future generations. We're fighting for a socialist world. There's a domino effect with the right, but there's also with the left. Every city deserves a Kshama. We need to fight for more. We need to fight for building movements. Thank you so much for being here tonight, for tuning in. The fight isn't over. We have so much work to do, but I hope everyone has a great Sunday night and solidarity.